Popular but controversial, South Africa's Jacob Zuma scored a resounding victory in the ANC leadership election. What does Zuma's win mean for the future of South Africa? And can he command a country seen as a leader of a whole continent? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Lauren Taylor. Jacob Zuma is savouring winning leadership of South Africa's ruling party, the African National Congress. ANC members voted Zuma and his supporters into the party's senior positions on Tuesday. The party dominates South African politics, so the victory lines him up to replace Thabo Mbeki as president when the next elections are held in 2009. Zuma is already replacing Mbeki as ANC leader after winning the job with 60% of the vote. It's the first time in more than 5 decades that the leadership was openly contested. But with Zuma's victory come questions about the impact he'll have on South African policies. In 2 terms in office, Mbeki took a pro-business stance and oversaw several years of economic growth in Africa's largest economy. Zuma has strong trade union support, and some investors think their influence could lead Zuma to shift economic policies to the left. Recently, Zuma has called for crime and AIDS to be considered national emergencies. Some South Africans accuse Mbeki of not paying enough attention to those issues. And he's criticised Mbeki's policy of diplomacy rather than confrontation over neighbouring Zimbabwe, where President Robert Mugabe is accused of ruining that country's economy. Let's take a look at the controversies that plagued Zuma's career just a few years ago. In 2005, Zuma was involved with an arms deal that led to corruption charges. At the time, Zuma was Mbeki's vice president, and Mbeki sacked him at the height of the scandal. The charges were withdrawn, but Zuma could still face charges. Then, just months later, a family friend, half Zuma's age, charged him with rape. Zuma was found not guilty and accused the media of demonising him. Well, joining our discussion today are our guests. In Johannesburg, David Monnier, an independent political analyst, and in London, Andrew Feinstein, an ANC member and former parliamentarian. If I could start with you, Andrew Feinstein, was this victory genuinely support for Zuma, or was it an attempt simply to a vote against Mr Mbeki?
I think it was predominantly a vote against Thabo Mbeki and his leadership style of the last few years. I think that Jacob Zuma had, over the past couple of years, come to represent the anti-Mbeki faction within the ANC, but there remain a great deal of question marks around Jacob Zuma himself.
And I mean, does he? Do you think he will introduce new politics, or is it simply just a kind of a battle within the ANC? Do you think he'll really mean change?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I do think that he will be under pressure from his supporters within the Congress of South African Trade Unions and the South African Communist Party to push the government, which obviously remains under Thabo Mbeki, with respect to their economic policy in particular, with respect to the urgency with which they're dealing with the HIV and AIDS pandemic in the country, and also in the way in which they're addressing issues of crime. So I think we could see a different emphasis, but I also think that fundamentally what underlay the division and the battle between them was competing centres of economic interests really within the ANC. People who on the one hand were benefiting from the patronage of the Mbeki years, and some of those who felt somewhat left out of those benefits.
Where does it leave Mbeki, though? Does it mean that he's effectively a lame duck president?
It certainly does. I think that his credibility, obviously, in the ANC is now shot. I think that places very serious question marks over his credibility as the president of the country. And I do think that he is going to be looking over his shoulder continuously now in the 16 or so months he has left in office to ensure that he does keep the leaders of the political party, the ANC, at whose favour he now serves, to ensure that he does keep them happy.
David Monye, if I could bring you in, the ANC is politically dominant, so the assumption generally seems to be that if Zuma can get away with the not being charged with corruption charges, then he would become president. What is the situation there with regards to the corruption charges? How likely is it that he would face those kind of charges again, and how soon will that happen?
I think everything depends with the constitutional court ruling. The appeal made by Jacob Zuma from the High Court previously. So it really depends. The outcome of the constitutional ruling will determine whether they will charge him soon. But I think chances are high that he might be charged at beginning of the year, early next year.
And what happens? I mean, so if for instance, he manages to get through that and he ends up as leading the country, how different do you think a leader he would be? Would he be? Would it be a matter of style, or is it really substance that would change under him?
I think it's a question of substance. Jacob Zuma doesn't have much difference when you compare his politics from President Thabo Mbeki. After all, he was in President Mbeki's government. He was helping President Thabo Mbeki to formulate as well as implement most of the policies that are problematic in some certain quarters. And therefore, he is going to be a president that is going to continue to a larger extent pushing some of the policies that President Mbeki has implemented. He has already assured the international business community that there's not going to be any economic policy shift.
If I could bring you in, Andrew Vanstein, what do you think about that? Is there any fear on the part of investors that that he might sort of change the course for the economy?
Oh, there certainly is. Speaking to people in the City of London, there are very real concerns, and those concerns are at two levels. The one is at the level of policy, and I do think that the key issue is going to be the extent to which he gives in to pressure from his allies in the trade union movement and the Communist Party, who have supported him through his rape trial, through the initial corruption charges. And I do think that there is going to be an IOU to some extent, and certainly investors here in the city feel that that might come in relation to economic policy, particularly the stringency of fiscal policy, the nature of the labour market and labour market regulation. So that's the one level. And then I think investors have another fear, and that is around the integrity of the man himself. You know, the corruption allegations that hang over him, which I was intimately involved in as a member of the Public Accounts Committee trying to investigate the arms deal in which the corruption allegedly took place. These are very serious allegations. And the fact that his personal financial advisor is currently serving 15 years in jail for fraud and corruption in relation to the arms deal and his relationship to Jacob Zuma suggests that there is a very serious case to be answered for. So I think investors are concerned both about possible policy changes if he does become president, but also about the integrity of the man given his recent history and the allegations that still surround him.
David Monye, what do you make of that? Is integrity an issue for both locally and internationally for people who are considering him as a possible leader?
I think the question of integrity, I mean, globally, is an issue that is going to work hard on three levels. One is the question of gender, the corruption, as well as the issue of dealing with of image change. I think his strategists have worked extremely hard. For the lack of a better word, he's like a man coming from the dead. He has managed to win. And there's no doubt that they might work extremely hard to change the perception around the man. He will continue running the party, given the fact that the ANC still run as a collective. There's a collective leadership. It's not a question of just Jacob Zuma. So it will be policy determined by the alliances that he has, SACP, COSATU, as well as the mainstream ANC.
You mentioned the ANC there. Andrew van Stein, if I could bring you back in, how strong an organisation is it now? Does it used to be impregnable? Now it's been looking as though it's very divided. Does that weaken it at all?
I think it does. I mean, I think it's at a very strange point in its history, in that Jacob Zuma's victory at one level is an endorsement of grassroots democracy in the ANC, in that the ANC's branches have turned against an incumbent leader, something that hasn't happened for almost 6 decades. So in that sense, there is a feeling that it is quite vibrant. But at another level, the last few years, the last 3 or 4 years, have been characterized by a moral decline in the ANC. There have been enormous allegations of conflicts of interest amongst many in leadership positions in the ANC, even of corruption in relation not only to the arms deal, but a number of subsequent events to that. And of course, the organization has probably never been so riven by factionalism and division as has happened between Zuma and Mbeki since the split with the Pan-Africanist Congress many decades ago. So I think the organisation itself is at something of a crossroads.
OK, well, we're at a crossroads. It's time for a short break at the moment. When we come back, we ask, could Jacob Zuma deliver what South Africans expect if he becomes the next president? Do stay with us.